So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Quarantine Kitchen. I think I do things a little bit differently today and do an entree instead of just all breads and carbohydrates, basically. So I thought I'd do what we're having for dinner tonight and chicken parmesan, which is actually pretty, well, it's not necessarily complicated, but I mean, there are steps to it. But it's still fairly easy to do. You can get restaurant quality, probably better than restaurant quality, chicken parmesan right at home. So I've got 5 chicken breasts, and then we've got our trio of sort of dredging, shall we say. So I've got the flour, so these will be your steps. So you got a flour to dust your chicken in first, and then you dip it in an egg wash. And then now typically I would use, or some people use Italian breadcrumbs when they bread their anything, sort of Italian. I like to just buy regular breadcrumbs and then just add a little bit of Italian seasoning, sort of sprinkled all in there. You can kind of eyeball it and then just mix it with your fingers. Maybe add a little bit more depending on the flavor that you want. But that way, I don't have to buy 2 different kinds of breadcrumbs, especially if you have all of these ingredients at home. So what I do first, I'm going to set these aside because those are when we go to cook the chicken. But first, what you're going to do now, I fold over a nice large sort of piece of saran wrap, and I saran wrap a cutting board. So that way there's less muck on my mallet. So you're gonna take, I try to handle the chicken as least as possible. So you're just gonna take your piece of chicken, and you're just going to pound the chicken out till you get about a 1/4 of an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch thick. But make sure it's nice and even. So that way your piece of chicken is nice and flattened. Now sort of about that consistency for you to roll out. So I'll come back once I pounded it on my chicken and we'll go to the next step. Okay, so we're over here at the stove. We've got our oil preheated, probably like just a little over medium because you want to be able to sear the chicken. And you're gonna sear the chicken for about 5 to 8 minutes per side. It could be longer depending on the size of your chicken breasts. So we're just gonna take 1 chicken breast, pat it down, make sure that it's covered on all sides, and your flour, you kind of mix it all in there so that way you're dredging properly, shake off the excess, and you're just going to flip it both sides into your egg wash. And let that kind of drip off. And you're gonna put it right down into your breadcrumbs. So I use a nice big fork when I'm doing this. And in your preheated skillet, mostly preheated skillet, you're gonna put all your chicken breasts and do the same, however many you can fit in your pan. Dredge it all. Cook for, usually takes anywhere between like 5 minutes a side, typically for any chicken that I do. You might need more egg. I used 2 eggs, so you just kind of have to eyeball how much you're going to end up needing. You don't want to use too many eggs, especially in today's crisis where there's no eggs available hardly anywhere. And we're just gonna do this for pieces 3 to 5. And then we'll see ya. Okay, so this is what your chicken should look like, all nice and golden, breaded chicken breasts. And then what we're gonna do now, I just use a can of crushed tomatoes. This is leftover crushed tomatoes, leftover from pizza night the other night. And so you just, now you can You can salt this if you want. You can put more Italian seasoning if you want a little bit more flavor. I usually just put the sauce over, and you're just gonna spoon it over just enough to kind of cover it, but not to go too far over. Just kind of do it that way. Maybe a little on the end. Now, I don't have to give any shout outs to any websites other than my mother. This is our family recipe that I have borrowed from her, and I make this all the time. And now we can't go out for chicken parmesan anymore because it's so much better when you make it yourself with really nice moist chicken breasts as opposed to the paper thin ones that you get in most restaurants that are fairly dry and, you know, almost tasteless really. But this is really nice and juicy. It's very flavorful. And again, it's as easy as it gets, really, because it really only takes, like I said, about 5 minutes per side, maybe even less, depending on the thickness of your chicken breast and how much you've pounded it out. Also, don't forget to use not the bumpy edge of your mallet, just the flat edge is sufficient. So once you've got all this, now I use parchment paper on my baking sheet also. It just absorbs some of the leftover oil and keeps sort of the breading intact. So that's what I use. Now I've got just some grated mozzarella, and it's probably 3 cups here, probably more than it should be, but who doesn't like cheese? It's extra good when you add cheese on it. Just enough so that way you get a really nice bubbly cheese, pulling it out of the oven. Now you're gonna cook this probably because your chicken's not gonna be entirely cooked through. So you're probably gonna wanna cook this from anywhere between 20 to 25 minutes in a 325 degree oven. There's that 325. I cook everything at 325, unless it's roasted potatoes, and that's at 400. But most, yeah, chicken cooks pretty quick. So 325 degrees, 20 minutes usually. Just until your cheese is sort of nice and golden and it's melted. And that way you know the rest of your chicken is cooked all the way through. So my kids like cheese. Who doesn't like cheese? And then, you know, all the kids pick up all of the burnt cheese pieces off the cookie sheet. And that's it. And I'll show you what the finished product should look like, but it's 5:30. Cheers. Okay, so this is fresh from the oven. This is how it should look. Nice and sort of golden. If you can hear that, your crust is still, or your coating is still crisp. Typically you would serve, or at least get it at a restaurant, you would get spaghetti with your chicken parmesan. I find that a bit too heavy. So we usually do either double vegetable or we'll do vegetable in a salad, which we're doing this evening. So I've done some nice French green beans with sauteed with just a little butter and garlic, which is really tasty, just till they're a bit still crunchy a little. And then I've just got a romaine lettuce with some spiced pecans. Thanks for tuning in again, and cheers.